2:30 MR. Grandview Corporate Center stood silent as a tomb. Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart down the 12th floor hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The CEO's corner office blazed with unusual light. Camera flashes strobed behind frosted glass. He approached slowly. Through the crack, he saw her, Vivian Grandview, the untouchable CEO, hunched over her computer. Designer suit wrinkled, blonde hair disheveled, mascara streaked down pale cheeks. On the monitor, hostile takeover complete, CEO position terminated. 3 black sedans prowled into the parking lot below, headlights cutting through darkness. Ms. Grandview? Marcus knocked softly. She spun around, eyes wide with terror. Marcus, I remember your name. Her voice cracked. They're going to kill me. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell below. Car doors slammed. The predators were coming. Marcus glanced at the approaching danger, then back at the broken woman who knew his name. In that split second, the invisible janitor made a choice that would shatter both their worlds. You're coming with me. Marcus grabbed Vivian's wrist, pulling her from the leather chair. She stumbled, expensive heels clicking against marble. The back elevator, he whispered, abandoning his cart. They moved through shadows, her breathing ragged behind him. The emergency exit sign glowed green in the darkness. Footsteps thundered up the main stairwell now, growing closer. Marcus swiped his security card. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding that seemed to echo like a gunshot. They slipped inside just as voices erupted from the corridor. Find her! The words were sharp, accented, dangerous. As the elevator descended, Vivian pressed herself against the corner, silk blouse torn at the shoulder. A purple bruise bloomed underneath the fabric. Her hands shook as she tried to smooth her disheveled hair. The elevator reached the parking garage with a mechanical sigh. The concrete cavern stretched before them like an underground tomb. Marcus led her between parked cars, their footsteps muffled by his worn sneakers and her now bare feet. She'd kicked off the heels somewhere during their escape. His beat-up Honda Civic sat in the corner, dented and forgotten among the luxury vehicles. As he fumbled for keys, Vivian glanced back at the elevator. They'll check the cameras. She breathed. Her voice carried a slight tremble, but underneath lay something harder. Survival instinct, perhaps. Marcus started the engine, and they pulled into the empty streets of Maple Ridge, Ohio. Dawn was still hours away. The radio played soft country music that seemed absurdly normal given the circumstances. Vivian stared out the passenger window at sleeping houses, porch lights glowing like distant stars. These were neighborhoods she'd driven through but never truly seen. Places where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, far from corporate boardrooms and hostile takeovers. The irony wasn't lost on her that salvation had come from someone she'd never bothered to know. 6 a.m. brought them to a neighborhood where dreams went to die quietly. Marcus parked behind a small house with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. The yard needed mowing. A child's bicycle lay on its side near the front steps, training wheels glinting in the morning light. Through the kitchen window, warm light spilled onto overgrown grass. Vivian followed him up the cracked walkway, her designer clothes absurdly out of place. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and yesterday's dinner. Simple smells that spoke of daily life, of routine, of home. An 8-year-old boy sat at a scratched wooden table, spreading peanut butter on bread with the concentration of a surgeon. Dad? Tyler looked up, his dark eyes widening at the sight of the strange woman. Who's she? His gaze took in her torn blouse, smeared makeup, and bare feet with the unflinching honesty of childhood. Vivian felt exposed under that innocent scrutiny, more vulnerable than she'd felt even in the office facing her corporate assassins. This is Vivian, Marcus said, hanging his keys on a hook by the door. She's having some trouble. Tyler studied Vivian with tilted head, processing this information with 8-year-old logic. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, aware that her torn blouse and smeared makeup told their own story. Everything about her screamed crisis, displacement, desperation. Yet Tyler's expression held no fear, only curiosity. "You look like the lady from the picture," Tyler said suddenly. Marcus tensed visibly. The framed newspaper clipping hung on the refrigerator. A local business section article about Grandview Industries' charitable foundation. In that picture, Vivian smiled confidently at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, wearing a crisp suit and perfect makeup. That woman seemed like a different person entirely from the one now standing in their kitchen, barefoot and broken. Tyler's innocent observation hung in the air like an accusation. How far she'd fallen in just one night. From penthouse to safe house, from power to powerlessness, from predator to prey. After Tyler left for school, backpack bouncing with each step, Vivian sat at the table while Marcus made coffee. His movements were efficient, economical, no wasted motion. The house was small but clean, everything in its place. She'd lived in penthouses that felt emptier than this cramped kitchen. The silence stretched between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at a garbage truck. Normal sounds of a normal morning in a normal neighborhood. Vivian couldn't remember the last time she'd experienced anything so beautifully ordinary. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. Marcus poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, neither of which matched the chipped saucers beneath them. "Those men weren't police," he said simply. His voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "And you looked—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound patronizing. "Like someone who needed help." Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm mug, inhaling the steam. It was cheap coffee, probably store brand. She'd never tasted anything better. "Richard Cain," she said finally, the name bitter on her tongue. "My business partner for 15 years. He planned this takeover for months." Her voice cracked slightly as the betrayal hit her again. "Last night, I discovered he'd transferred $50 million from our charity foundation to offshore accounts. But somehow the transfers show my authorization codes." Marcus listened without interrupting, his calloused hand steady on his mug. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. "The men who came for me. They're not Richards," she continued, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. "They work for people Richard owes money to. Drug cartels. He's been laundering their cash through the foundation." She looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes for the first time since they'd sat down. "I'm not just a disgraced CEO. I'm a witness to murder and money laundering. They'll kill me to protect their operation." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and inescapable. Marcus absorbed this information with the same calm he'd shown during their escape. No shock, no judgment, no immediate suggestions, just quiet acceptance of a situation far beyond his experience. "What do you need?" he asked simply. The question caught Vivian off guard. Not what had she done, not how had she gotten into this mess, not what was her plan, just what did she need? It was perhaps the kindest question anyone had asked her in years. The next week passed in careful routine that felt both foreign and comforting to Vivian. She helped Tyler with homework while Marcus slept, preparing for his night shifts. Mathematics came easily to her. Numbers had always made sense in ways people never had. Tyler was fascinated by her ability to break down complex problems into manageable pieces. "How do you know all this?" he asked one afternoon, pencil poised over a fraction worksheet. "I used to run a company," she said simply. Companies are basically big math problems. She'd found old clothes in a closet, probably left behind by Tyler's mother, Marcus had explained with characteristic brevity. They fit poorly, but felt honest in a way her designer wardrobe never had. The cotton was soft from many washings, comfortable rather than impressive. Tyler was endlessly curious about her previous life, asking questions with the fearless directness of childhood. Were you rich? Very. Did you have a big house? Very big. Were you happy? That question stopped her cold. Had she been happy? Or had she simply been successful, mistaking one for the other? Tyler grinned at her answers, gap-toothed and trusting. Dad says you're hiding from bad guys, like in the movies. Vivian's chest tightened at his easy acceptance of her situation. To him, she was simply another adult who needed help, no different from a neighbor borrowing sugar or a friend needing a ride. Something like that, she agreed. Tyler nodded sagely and returned to his fractions, already moving on to the next interesting thing in his 8-year-old world. Marcus returned from work earlier than usual on Thursday morning, his face grim. My supervisor wants to see me today, he said, avoiding Vivian's eyes as he hung up his jacket. Someone's been asking questions about you. The coffee in Vivian's cup suddenly tasted like ash. She'd known this moment would come, had been dreading it since her first night in their home. Her presence here put them all at risk. Every day she stayed increased the danger to Marcus and Tyler. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. Marcus emerged from the Grandview building carrying a cardboard box containing his few personal items. His supervisor had been apologetic but firm, harboring a fugitive violated company policy. Security footage had been reviewed. Questions had been asked. Conclusions had been drawn. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been fired from cleaning the building owned by the woman now living in his spare room. 3 years of steady employment, gone because he'd chosen to help someone in need. That evening, he spread bills across the kitchen table while Vivian watched from the doorway. The stack seemed to grow taller under the harsh fluorescent light. Mortgage payment. Utilities. Tyler's school supplies. Car insurance. Without his income, they had maybe 2 months before losing the house. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. Vivian had built a career on numbers like these, but seeing them applied to Marcus's life felt different. Personal. Devastating. I have money, Vivian said quietly, stepping into the kitchen. Accounts Richard doesn't know about. Marcus shook his head without looking up from the bills. Using them would expose your location. She moved closer, studying the stack of overdue notices with professional eye. Late fees were already accumulating. Interest rates climbing. The spiral had begun. Marcus, you lost your job because of me. Let me help. He looked up then, something fierce in his usually gentle eyes. I didn't help you for money. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, neither was ready to examine. Outside, a car engine idled in the street longer than it should have. They both heard it. Both pretended they hadn't. Both understood that their temporary safety was built on foundations as fragile as morning frost. The sound followed them into uneasy sleep, a reminder that predators were patient and that hiding was not the same as escaping. Saturday brought news that made Vivian's blood freeze in her veins. Tyler bounded through the front door, school backpack bouncing, his face flushed with excitement and confusion. Dad! Everyone at school is talking about Ms. Vivian. He dropped his bag with a thud and pulled out a crumpled newspaper. The headline screamed across the front page. Wanted. CEO Vivian Grandview. Murder suspect. Below it, her corporate headshot stared back accusingly. Professional. Confident. Guilty. Marcus snatched the paper, scanning the article with growing horror. A security guard had been found dead in the Grandview building. Evidence allegedly tied Vivian to the murder. Witnesses claimed to have seen her fleeing the scene. The victim was identified as James Rodriguez, 43, father of 2, a man whose only crime had been working the wrong shift on the wrong night. They killed him, Vivian whispered, sinking into a chair. James was working the night shift. He must have seen something, recorded something. So they silenced him and pinned it on me. Tyler looked between the adults, his 8-year-old mind struggling to process the contradiction. The newspaper said Ms. Vivian was bad, dangerous, a killer. But Ms. Vivian helped him with math homework. She made pancakes on Saturday mornings. She listened when he talked about school problems. She wasn't bad. Tyler was certain of that with the absolute conviction only children possessed. But Ms. Vivian helps me with math homework. She makes good pancakes. She's not bad. His voice carried the stubborn logic of childhood, immune to adult complications. Marcus knelt to Tyler's eye level, choosing his words carefully. Son, sometimes people lie about others to protect themselves. Tyler's brow furrowed in concentration, working through this new concept. Like when Connor blamed me for breaking the window, but it was really his baseball. Marcus nodded, relieved that Tyler could grasp the concept in terms he understood. Exactly like that, but bigger. Much bigger, with stakes Tyler couldn't yet comprehend. Tyler studied Vivian's face with that unnerving childhood perception that cut through pretense to truth. You didn't hurt anybody, did you? Vivian's voice came out barely above a whisper. No, sweetie, I didn't. The words felt inadequate against the weight of accusation, but they were all she had. Truth, simple and stark. Tyler nodded once, decisively, his verdict rendered with the absolute certainty of childhood faith. Then we'll protect you. That's what families do. The casual way he included her in that circle, as if she'd always belonged there, brought tears to Vivian's eyes. When had anyone last claimed her as family? Monday morning brought Detective Morrison to their door. He was a weathered man in his 50s, salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, eyes that had seen too much but retained their humanity. Marcus answered the knock while Vivian hid upstairs, listening through the heating vent that connected her room to the living room below. Every word drifted up with crystal clarity. Mr. Thompson, I'm investigating the whereabouts of Vivian Grandview. Morrison's voice was measured, professional, but not unkind. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the panic clawing at his chest. Morrison smiled sadly, the expression of a man who'd heard every lie the human mind could construct. Marcus. Can I call you Marcus? I have security footage of you leaving the Grandview building with Ms. Grandview the night she disappeared. He paused, letting this information settle. Your concern for her welfare is admirable, but harboring a fugitive is a felony. The detective stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost paternal. I have a son, too. Think about Tyler's future. After Morrison left, promising to return with a warrant if necessary, Vivian came downstairs. Her face was pale but determined, the CEO mask sliding back into place. I have to go. Marcus blocked her path to the door with his body. Where? The question hung unanswered because she had no destination, no plan beyond running. Always running, never arriving anywhere safe. Vivian, Detective Morrison wasn't trying to arrest you. He was trying to help. Her laugh was bitter, edged with hysteria. Help? I'm wanted for murder. Marcus grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. He could have brought backup, could have forced his way in. Instead, he warned me. Vivian stared at him, her analytical mind clicking through possibilities she'd been too panicked to consider. You think he knows I'm innocent? Marcus nodded slowly. I think he knows more than he's letting on, and I think he wants us to trust him. The question was whether they could afford to. Trust was a luxury for people who had options. But what choice did they have? That evening, Marcus made a decision that would either save them all or destroy what little safety they'd built. He called Detective Morrison from a payphone outside the local grocery store, speaking in code they'd hastily devised. The meeting was set for 10 p.m. at the abandoned Riverside warehouse, neutral ground where prying eyes couldn't follow. Vivian insisted on coming despite Marcus's protests. "If this is a trap, we go down together," she said with quiet dignity. They drove through empty streets, Tyler safely at a neighbor's house with a story about a late work emergency. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, broken windows like dead eyes staring down at their approach. Morrison's sedan was already there, engine running, exhaust visible in the cold air. He stepped out alone, hands visible, no threatening movements. No backup cars lurked in the shadows, no SWAT team crouched behind concrete barriers. Just one tired detective who looked like he'd rather be home with his family, watching late-night television and forgetting the weight of other people's tragedies. "Ms. Grandview." Morrison nodded as they approached across the cracked asphalt. "You're a difficult woman to find." His tone held no accusation, only weary respect for someone who'd managed to stay hidden this long. Professional appreciation for a worthy opponent. "Detective Morrison," Vivian replied carefully, every word measured. "Marcus says you might be willing to help." Morrison pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents that rustled in the night breeze. "I've been investigating Richard Cain for 6 months. Money laundering, ties to the Torino crime family, possible murder. The security guard's death fits the pattern." He handed her the folder with steady hands. "James Rodriguez sent me an email 2 hours before he died. Video footage of men entering the building. The same men who tried to grab you that night." Vivian's hands shook as she opened the folder, seeing surveillance photos of the men who'd hunted her through the corridors of her own building. Their faces were clear, unmasked, confident. They hadn't expected witnesses. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, studying Morrison's weathered face for deception and finding only exhaustion. Morrison's face hardened, shadows deepening the lines around his eyes. "Because 20 years ago I was a young cop who took money to look the other way. A woman died because of my cowardice." His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I can't bring her back, but I can make sure you don't end up like her." The confession hung between them like a bridge built from regret and determination. Redemption was a powerful motivator, Vivian realized, sometimes more powerful than justice itself. He outlined his plan with military precision. Vivian would need to return to the Grandview building to access Richard's personal computer. The evidence was there. She was certain of it. Richard's arrogance would be his downfall. He'd keep trophies of his crimes, digital souvenirs of his cleverness. But the building was watched now. Security had been tripled. Armed guards patrolled every entrance. "It's suicide," Marcus said flatly. Morrison nodded in grim agreement. "Unless we're very smart about it. And very lucky." Vivian looked between the two men who'd risked everything for her. "When do we start?" The plan required precise timing and absolute trust, commodities in short supply among people who'd learned that betrayal wore familiar faces. Morrison would create a distraction at the building's main entrance, a report of suspicious activity that would draw security attention away from the upper floors. Marcus, using his intimate knowledge of the building's service areas, would get Vivian inside through the loading dock. She would have 30 minutes to access Richard's computer and download everything. 30 minutes before the distraction ended and security returned to normal patterns. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was their only chance. "If something goes wrong," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of experience with plans that went sideways, "I'll do what I can to get you out. But once you're inside, you're on your own." Vivian nodded, her CEO instincts taking over despite the para clawing at her chest. Risk assessment. Cost-benefit analysis. The numbers were terrible. The alternative was worse. Sometimes the only choice was between bad options and catastrophic ones. Thursday night, 11 p.m. Marcus and Vivian crouched behind a dumpster in the alley behind Grandview Corporate Tower, the building where she'd once commanded an empire and he'd cleaned up after her success. The loading dock key Marcus had copied during his 3 years of employment felt heavy in his pocket. Through their earpieces, Morrison's voice crackled with static. "Distraction is go. You have 30 minutes starting. Now." They moved like shadows through Marcus's memorized geography of blind spots and forgotten corners. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt eternal, each floor number lighting up like a countdown to disaster. Vivian's hands were steady now, adrenaline burning away fear and replacing it with cold focus. This was what she did. Solve problems, find solutions, execute plans under pressure. The skills that had built her empire would now be used to tear down her enemies. Richard's office door yielded to her executive override code. He hadn't changed it, the arrogant bastard. Some people never learned that yesterday's privileges could become today's vulnerabilities. The computer demanded a password, cursor blinking with mechanical patience. Vivian closed her eyes, thinking like Richard, predicting his patterns. He was predictable in his narcissism, choosing passwords that fed his ego rather than ensuring security. She tried his birthday. Wrong. His daughter's name. Wrong. Then, with sudden clarity born of desperate insight, she typed, Torino 2019. The year his gambling debts to the crime family had begun, the year his desperation had outweighed his caution. The screen unlocked like a vault revealing its treasures. Files cascaded before her eyes in overwhelming abundance. Bank transfers documented with meticulous detail. Email chains with cartel representatives discussing logistics like any other business correspondence. Videos of meetings where murder was discussed like quarterly earnings, casual and professional. And there, buried in a folder marked insurance, the security footage from the night James Rodriguez died. Richard himself, strangling the guard who'd discovered too much, who'd asked too many questions, who'd become a liability rather than an asset. Vivian's hands flew over the keyboard, copying everything to her flash drive, while precious seconds ticked away. 28 minutes. 29. The building lights flickered once. Morrison signaled that time was up, that the distraction was ending, that security would return to normal patterns within moments. She yanked the drive free and ran for the elevator, heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. They made it to the loading dock as security returned to their posts, voices echoing in the corridors above. But something was wrong. Too many footsteps in the corridor beyond. Too many voices speaking in rapid, accented English. The plan had been discovered or anticipated. Marcus grabbed Vivian's hand, pulling her toward an emergency exit just as the lights blazed on with surgical brightness. "There!" a voice shouted in the same accent she remembered from that first night. The hunters had found their prey. Bullets sparked off of metal door frames as they ran, the sound echoing through the concrete cavern like thunder. Morrison's sedan screamed around the corner, passenger door swinging open before the car had fully stopped. They dove inside as more gunfire erupted, Marcus shielding Vivian with his body as glass rained down from shot-out windows. "Drive!" Vivian shouted unnecessarily. Morrison was already flooring the accelerator, tires smoking against asphalt as they rocketed toward the street. Behind them, black SUVs roared to life, giving chase through the empty streets of Maple Ridge. The chase ended at the Ohio State Police Barracks, where Morrison had arranged for backup that materialized like guardian angels. Federal agents swarmed the area as the pursuing vehicles melted away into the night, their occupants unwilling to engage law enforcement directly. Agent Williams, FBI Cybercrime Division, took possession of the flash drive with reverent care, handling it like a holy relic. "This is enough to bring down the entire Torino operation," she said, eyes bright with anticipation. "Money laundering, murder, conspiracy, we've got them all." Richard Cain was arrested at his home 3 hours later, found destroying documents in his backyard fire pit like a suburban pyromaniac. The arresting officers noted that he seemed more surprised by the charges than by their presence, as if he'd genuinely believed himself untouchable. Morrison had been right. Richard's arrogance had blinded him to the possibility that anyone would dare challenge his carefully constructed empire. Power, it seemed, was its own form of blindness. The trial lasted 6 weeks that felt like 6 years. Marcus sat in the gallery every day, Tyler beside him during school breaks, both watching Vivian testify with calm precision that belied the chaos of recent months. She laid out the evidence methodically, building a case that would send Richard Cain to prison for life. The media had transformed her from fugitive CEO to corporate whistleblower. But Marcus knew the truth was more complex. She was simply a woman who'd found the courage to stand up when everything she'd built came crashing down. On the day of sentencing, Richard's eyes found hers across the courtroom. His expression held no remorse, only rage at being outsmarted by someone he'd considered inferior. The judge's words rang with finality that echoed off marble walls. 30 years, federal prison, no possibility of parole. Justice, Vivian reflected, was a dish best served systematically, with proper documentation and overwhelming evidence. Richard was led away in shackles, his empire crumbling behind him like a house built on sand. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions about Vivian's future plans, their cameras clicking like mechanical insects. She answered politely, but kept glancing toward Marcus and Tyler, who waited by their car with patient loyalty. "Will you be returning to New York?" a journalist asked, microphone thrust toward her face. "Rebuilding Grandview Industries?" Vivian smiled, the expression reaching her eyes for the first time in months. "I'm starting something new here in Maple Ridge, something smaller, something that matters." Tyler broke free from Marcus's protective hand, running to hug her waist with the fearless affection of childhood. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" he asked, loud enough for the cameras to catch, his voice carrying across the courthouse steps. Vivian knelt to his eye level, unmindful of the designer suit she'd worn for court, unmindful of the watching world. "Forever," she promised with quiet conviction, "if your dad will have me." 2 months later, Vivian signed the lease on a small office space downtown, the pen scratching across paper with satisfying finality. The sign read, "Grandview Educational Solutions," in modest lettering that spoke of purpose rather than power. Her first employee was Marcus, who discovered a talent for connecting with clients that his night shift years had hidden beneath layers of invisibility. Tyler served as their unofficial beta tester, evaluating educational software with the brutal honesty only children possessed. The company specialized in learning programs for disadvantaged kids, children like Tyler, who had potential that traditional systems often overlooked or dismissed. It wasn't the corporate empire Vivian had lost, but it felt more real, more purposeful, more like something worth building rather than merely accumulating. Success, she was learning, could be measured in different currencies than profit margins and market share. The small house with peeling paint became home in ways the penthouse never had. Vivian learned to cook Tyler's favorite meals, helped with homework at the scratched kitchen table, and discovered that contentment could be found in simple routines. Marcus watched her transformation with quiet amazement. From brittle CEO to warm surrogate mother to business partner to something more complicated that neither of them was quite ready to define or name. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Tyler practice riding his bike without training wheels, wobbling but determined, she asked, "Do you ever regret it? That night you chose to help me?" Marcus considered the question seriously, weighing honesty against kindness. "I regret that it took so long to find you," he said finally. The words hung in the evening air like a promise, like a prayer answered. 6 months after this trial, Detective Morrison retired from the force with full honors. His last case had given him something he'd thought lost forever: redemption, and the knowledge that sometimes good people won. He sent them a wedding invitation that fall, marrying his longtime girlfriend in a small ceremony, attended by grateful victims he'd helped over the years. Vivian and Marcus went together, not quite a couple, but no longer just friends, their relationship evolving like flowers growing toward light. Tyler served as unofficial ring-bearer, taking his duties with the seriousness he brought to everything important. During the reception, Morrison pulled them aside, his weathered face soft with gratitude. "You know, that night at the warehouse, I wasn't sure you'd trust me." Vivian smiled, remembering her terror and Marcus's steady faith. "Marcus taught me that sometimes you have to have faith in people, even when logic says otherwise." The proposal came on a Tuesday morning in spring, nothing like the elaborate gestures Richard had always favored for his public displays. Marcus was making coffee, while Vivian helped Tyler with a particularly stubborn algebra problem that had frustrated him for days. 7 goes into 42 how many times? She asked patiently, guiding him through the steps. 6! Tyler shouted triumphantly, pencil thrust in the air like a victory flag. "I got it!" As he ran off to find his backpack, Marcus set down his coffee mug and pulled out a simple ring. "Vivian," he said quietly, the morning light streaming through their kitchen window. "Will you marry us?" She looked at the ring. Not expensive, but chosen with care and love. Then at Tyler, gathering his school supplies with characteristic enthusiasm, then at Marcus with his calloused hands and gentle eyes. "I thought you'd never ask," she whispered. Tyler's whoop of joy from the hallway suggested he'd been eavesdropping with the skill of a practiced spy. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of their little house under a canopy of spring leaves. Tyler walked Vivian down the makeshift aisle, beaming with pride at his dual role as son and escort. Detective Morrison officiated, his words simple and heartfelt, carrying the weight of experience with love and loss. "Marriage isn't about finding someone to complete you," he said, looking directly at the couple. "It's about choosing someone to face life's challenges with day after day, decision after decision." When Marcus slipped the ring onto Vivian's finger, she thought about the night he'd first said those words. "You're coming with me." Neither of them had known where that path would lead. Neither had imagined it would bring them here, to this moment, to this choice to stay together not from desperation, but from hope. Love, she realized, was the ultimate act of faith, believing in tomorrow when today offered no guarantees. 3 years later, Tyler helped his baby sister Lily take her first steps across the living room floor, his patience infinite as he coaxed her forward. Vivian caught her just before she tumbled, both of them laughing with pure joy. Marcus watched from the doorway, still amazed by the family they'd somehow assembled from broken pieces. The business had grown slowly but steadily, employing 12 people and serving school districts across 3 states. They'd received offers from larger companies wanting to buy them out, investors with deep pockets and shallow souls. But Vivian always declined with polite firmness. "We're not for sale," she'd tell interested investors who couldn't understand success that wasn't measured in dollars. "We're exactly the right size." Tyler, now 11, and showing alarming signs of inheriting his mother's business acumen, had started suggesting improvements to their software during family dinners. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, Marcus and Vivian would sit on the porch and remember that first night. How terror had brought them together, how trust had kept them together, how love had grown in the space between crisis and calm. "Do you think Richard ever wonders what happened to us?" Vivian asked one such evening, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Marcus shrugged, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Prison gives people lots of time to think. But I hope he's figured out that some things can't be bought or stolen or destroyed." He took her hand, wedding ring catching the porch light like a small beacon. "Family isn't a business transaction. It's a choice you make every day." Above them, stars wheeled in patterns older than ambition, older than betrayal, older than everything except the human need to belong somewhere safe. The story could have ended with revenge or riches or dramatic confrontations in boardrooms and courtrooms. Instead, it ended with Tyler teaching Lily to ride a bicycle while their parents watched from lawn chairs, coffee growing cold in forgotten mugs. It ended with Vivian discovering that success wasn't measured in market share, but in moments like these. Ordinary Tuesday afternoons when everyone she loved was safe and happy and home. It ended with Marcus realizing that the broken woman he'd rescued that night had rescued him right back, pulling him from invisibility into a life worth living. It ended with the sound of children's laughter echoing through a neighborhood where dreams didn't go to die. They went to grow slowly, carefully, and with great love. Some stories end with explosions and dramatic music. This one ended with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a family well loved, and a choice made in darkness that brought them all into light.